development, with certain areas getting benefits over others. Corruption is a big issue in Southeast Asia. Seen recently in New Zealand as well, with some of the opportunistic uses of public funds recently. Obviously, conflict is a huge cause of poverty as well, and Southeast Asia, unfortunately, has a very unfortunate history of poverty and of conflict in particular areas like Cambodia, obviously Timor, which is similar level of destruction as Cambodia, where they've lost about a quarter to a third of the population during conflict or during poor governance. Poverty can also be caused by the provision of services, and so looking at social biases, who receives the best services. So this is like, again, talking about education and healthcare. There's geographic biases where most of these sort of facilities are normally focused in the cities, particularly in market economies, not so much in state economies. Social biases where if you bring in a market economy, often the poor can't afford the access to these services, so they get more and more disadvantaged by these programs. Then we've also talked about this sort of stuff, the poverty being caused by environmental degradation, sea level rise, obviously going to be a big issue in the future. Natural disasters like we saw with the Asian tsunami, or more recently with Cyclone Nargis in Burma, which obviously causes a huge amount of suffering and poverty in particular areas. The thing which we should also be aware of down the bottom here is just that some people might prefer a lifestyle that we associate with poverty. And to give sort of, I don't know, a classic example perhaps is if we look at monks who may be living in a Buddhist temple and living with virtually nothing, surviving only on handouts. If we took a non-opportunistic sort of definition of poverty and we said poverty is defined by how much money you earn and these sorts of things, we'd say those monks are living in poverty and we need to help them. Or we look at indigenous people who are living in remote areas in the highlands of Southeast Asia. I think I had a talk last month about the Hmong people. They might also want to protect their lifestyles, so that what we can assume, what we might initially assume is poverty-stricken, is actually just them trying to exist within their own cultural priorities. So it's really important we understand what we mean by when we start thinking about poverty. I'm assuming you're familiar with Southeast Asia. If not, I suppose you will be soon. This is what I call Southeast Asia anyway. Anything from Myanmar or Burma on the left-hand side all the way down to Timor down here. And this is part of Indonesia still, this massive country down here. And the Philippines is included in that, in the island up here. So if we think about where poverty occurs, again, it gets a little bit confusing if we think about it at the national scale or the local scale. So in terms of the national scale, where do you think poverty is most common in Southeast Asia? What sort of countries' problems with poverty do you think? More so than others?
Places like Burma and Laos.
Burma and Laos, yep. Yep, definitely.
Timor-Leste.
Timor-Leste, yep.
Papua, Western Papua.
Yeah, Western Papua. So again, going from Indonesia to a smaller province, which is West Papua, which is this one here, which is labelled here in Jaya here, which is the old name for it. So if we think about poverty then, it depends what scale we're going to focus on. So the poorest country in Southeast Asia, the one which, for various reasons, as other measures have probably indicated as being the most immersed in poverty, not just economically, but lack of opportunity, is probably it's probably a toss-up actually between Timor and Burma, I'd say. But Laos also has a lot of problems. One way in which you can investigate poverty is to look at various indicators, and so I can just click on some of these things. There's some indicators when we think about poverty, showing all the Southeast Asian countries there, I think. Are you all familiar with the Human Development Index? Has anyone not heard of that? Okay. So the Human Development Index is something which is produced by the UNDP, which is the United Nations Development Programme, and every year they rank countries according to the level of development. And the level of development is determined by various economic and social indicators, and some environmental indicators as well, perhaps. No, not environmental, just social and economic. So access to education, access to healthcare, there's some gender measures like the amount of women who are in positions of power, and as well as all the standard sort of economic measures. And so this ranking here is probably the best indicator of how developed a country is. And up the top last year, I think Iceland was number 1, and it won't be next year because of the credit crisis. I think New Zealand, I can't remember exactly, but I think it's around the 20s, about 20 or 18 or something like that. Does anyone know what New Zealand is?
We were behind Australia by like 3 countries.
Yeah.
Behind Australia again.
But so if we think about Southeast Asia, we can see that Singapore is probably the most developed, and down the bottom we've got Timor-Leste, which is the lowest Asian country in the Human Development Index. After Timor-Leste, they're all African countries, so again, we can see regional differences there. What's that?
Ours gets 4 and we get 20.
Okay, right. It's a better country, that's what I can. So economic measures, you see GDP per capita, Singapore very wealthy. When you get down to these countries down the bottom, you're living on $1 or $2 a day. For all those countries beneath Vietnam, so Vietnam, Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos, and Timor-Leste, living on $1 or $2 a day. Now, we're trying to get beyond just economic poverty, but it does give us an indicator of what opportunities are available. If you don't have enough money, it's very hard to access knowledge, very hard to access health, all those things that can mobilise us to take whatever opportunities that we want. At the same time, we don't just want to read it off and say the economic indicator is the only important thing there. In terms of the different measures of poverty, we can see on the right-hand side the population living beneath the national poverty line. Again, this is a purely economic measure. And you can see some countries having over 30% of people, by their own measurements, is living beneath that poverty line.
What are the ones that are in grey?
They're countries that have not adopted a market system originally. So we've got market systems here and then state-led countries over there. A lot of these countries have been immersed in more state-led countries, so it's not a really good. This is another measure which looks at population living below $2 a day, looking at various inequality within societies. And so again, the Gini index, if you have a score of 1, means, or sorry, a score of 100, that means you have perfect inequality in that one person owns all the resources in the country. If you have a score of 0, it's perfect equality in that everyone has exactly the same amount. So the lower the score is, the better the score here. And we can see here that the market-led economies, in general, are more unequal than the state-led economies, which is what you'd expect between a market and a state-led approach.